Welcome back. I'm Becca.
And I'm Bree, and this is Spooky Happy Hour.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Yeah, we hope your weekend has been wonderful. It's about to be the weekend again. Thirsty Thursday drop day.
Hello. Yeah, and finally I have
Yes!
the same cup. What?
So, for those of you who are listening on Spotify, when we were first coming up
Mhm.
with the concept for the podcast, we talked about happy hour, and we've both had our kind of eclectic collection of drinkware.
Yes.
And we decided, I was looking on Amazon one day and they were just these slender, cute, like goblet style black glasses. And I was like, these would be perfect. But, since we live in different countries, we were like, maybe we'll just exchange whenever we get to Penhurst. So we did. And I brought her her little glass. And now we get to
Yeah.
cheers to having the same. And
Matching.
I know. Last night, since for all of our listeners out there, last night I had an investigation with a local paranormal group at this like little hotspot that I didn't even know really existed, and at least in the paranormal type
Mhm.
world, right? And it's like been right under my nose the entire time. I'm like, I used to go watch my cousin practice karate there, like go to
Oh
his
my
karate
god.
classes. Like, when I heard that, like, oh, the Liberty Theater in town is like haunted, I was like, nah, but it's not. Like, I've lived here for, I mean, minus my 10-year stint in Colorado, I'm like, I've lived here for pretty much forever.
Mhm.
So, no, I definitely would have heard of that, but I didn't. And to my surprise, like it was, yeah, pretty active. So yeah, I'm like running on fumes. I
Wow.
chugged a Red Bull. Now I'm about to drink my standard, right? It's dragonberry rum and pink lemonade. Like I don't deviate all that much.
Nice.
But yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna feel like when I'm done today? It's like, when you have that like one or two drinks and you just sleep so soundly, but if you
Mhm.
had another drink, then you would be like really like out and wake up and feel like shit. I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like after this, I'm gonna have like the most perfect night's sleep. That's what I'm
Probably.
hoping for. I'm like crossing my fingers.
I hope so. That's like my Thursday. I ended up going back for my second tattoo session, and we worked on one little area, and I hate to admit it, but I had to use the numbing spray for the first time in my life, and I
Dude, it's
felt
your
like a
entire
chicken.
side. Like
I know,
you're
and,
gonna have
like
multiple sessions, so why
I
not
know.
make them a little bit more comfortable?
I felt like a wuss, but the girl said I took it like a champ because most people, like, flop like a fish, and I guess I was giving off so much body heat that I was just sweating, and she told me to wear, like, it's kinda, like, close to like, my butt, so, like, my pants were down, so I needed comfy pants, so I wore, like, my Fear Gear pants, which are, like, fairly, like they're heavier,
Mhm.
and I could feel, like, the sweat dripping down my back and stuff, and then I had to drive home, and I don't know if it was just from, like, the adrenaline from getting the tattoo and,
Oh
like,
yeah.
me driving home. Okay, normally it takes an hour and 15 minutes because she's just, like, not in the city, just, like, kind of around. Um, I booked it home, like, a little too fast. I went a little too fast on that highway, and I was like, "I gotta get home to my dog, and I gotta let her out." And I lied on the couch, and I had a couple friends messaging me saying like, "Hey, are we going to this party tonight?" And I'm like, maybe."
No.
And once I got home, I just crashed. And then I was like, still a zombie the next day. I was just like kind of in pain, still tired, and I feel like haven't done much this weekend.
Well, I mean, it takes a lot out of you
Oh
because
my god, yeah.
tattoos, especially like so large and intricate, and having that
Mhm.
done for so long too, it's like a trauma to the body,
Yeah.
that you're like willingly accepting. So it makes sense, like you said, with like adrenaline rushing and the crash afterwards. Like
Mhm.
it'll take you a couple days, I feel like, to really like get back into the swing of things, which kind of like,
Yeah.
now that we're talking about it, we've discussed the crew and going on all of these things like back to back to back, and how mentally and physically draining it is, and how that probably takes a toll on how scared they get
Mhm.
and what they actually experience. And yeah, it makes sense, right? Like doing an investigation last night and like being on high alert and just like probably experiencing like most of the gambit of emotions, and then having to go home. You want to process it. I live like
Mhm.
5 minutes away. So it's like
Wow.
not like a long drive home. And then I get
Yeah.
home and I'm like sitting in my bed and I'm like, I was like texting you. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like excited. Like, I want to go to bed. I'm freaking exhausted. But I think that I got like maybe, I don't know, 5 hours of sleep maybe last night,
Mhm.
um, which sometimes, like, I can get by with, but after
Mhm.
being in the sun all day yesterday
Oh,
and
yeah.
then doing an investigation, and I'm lying there and, like, half of my body is sunburnt, so, um from my top and, like, my, like, high-waisted bottoms, there's, like, 2 pieces, but, like, a very little slither of my stomach, like, and my back the whole way around, there's, like, maybe this much of a like, maybe an inch, between the 2, and normally, I just, like, pull it down, it looks like an entire one piece, even though it's not,
Oh,
and I get in the
no.
shower today, and there's this, like, ribbon of red r all the way
Oh,
around.
no.
I was like
Oh,
I was like, 1, it, like, kind of hurts. 2, I definitely can't wear a real bra, and
no.
3, I was like, "This is it's just hysterical because it's lobster red on my
Oh.
pasty white skin," and I was like, "Okay, cool. I will wear this with a badge of honor."
Mhm. Oh my god, at least it's all the way around, like, I just like, I'm compared to the side by side here, I'm so white, and, like, I just my shoulders will tan and my arms will tan, my face will burn, and the front of my legs will burn, and, like, I'll try to rotate, I'll try to get it no, I literally have to go to a tanning bed, get a base, and then I tan in the
Yeah.
sunshine. It's so unfair.
As soon as I, like, burn, the next day, I'm, like, totally fine. I have, like, olive complexion anyway,
Mhm.
so it's easier to burn, and then it's, like, the next day, you can tell it's kind of still a burn, and then the day after that, it's, like, a normal base tan, and I can, like, build off of that, but it really freaking takes it out of you.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, sunburns for sure, they, like, knock me out.
Yeah, or even just, like, like, being outside all day and, like, being on my feet and, like, not sitting down at all and running from this activity to this activity or whatever. It
Mm,
was exhausting, and I feel like I kind of, like, experienced a little bit about, like, maybe what these road trips could be like on your body.
mhm,
Because even after just doing that all day and then going to the investigation, like, I got home at, like, maybe 2:30, tried to go to sleep around, like, 3, and I was, like, feeling it today. Like, I could not imagine right now jumping into another location.
yeah.
And,
Yeah,
like,
and,
they
like
do that back to back to back and may have only had, like, a day or 2 of travel in between,
mhm,
but you're still, like, doing things and being, like, stuck in an RV like they are, it's still draining anyway, like, to be
yeah,
on the road and to travel and to, get stuck in traffic for 3 hours or have to, like, get a rental car because your RV decided that it wanted to malfunction and it wasn't safe anymore. It's like that's
mhm,
even if you are just like waiting or riding, it's still a really long travel day. And in this episode, they traveled to West Virginia State Penitentiary, also known as Moundsville Penitentiary because it's in
mhm,
Moundsville, West Virginia. And
mhm,
I've actually been here multiple times, and my first encounter with it, I didn't even know about it, and my roommate and I lived in this, like, super little house, like, that house was the house that it was the reason why I know I have a mold allergy,
oh god.
because it was awful. Like, we had this, like, slumlord, and he owned, like, most of the rentals in, like, our college town, and, like, everybody just, lived in squalor, I feel like, and
Oh
it was okay
no.
because we were, like, college kids, and most of the time we were just like going to class or not going to class and then like getting wasted. Like we just needed a place to sleep really.
Right.
But her and I lived there together, and she was one of my best friends. She was like, "Hey, I have this like birthday trip like planned out for you." And like everyone knows me. I'm like, "Oh, we're going on a trip? Tell me when. I'm gonna pack 3 days beforehand. I'm gonna get
Mhm.
my list out. I'm ready to rock and roll." And she's like, "Well, it's only like an hour and 15 minutes away." And she ended up taking me to Moundsville. And since my birthday is in October,
Mhm.
they do a whole haunted house in
Oh,
the
yeah.
penitentiary. So we go, and like the electric chair that they have there is like, I mean, it's like a replica, but whatever. It's sitting right there. And so it's really ominous when you walk in there. And the haunted house itself was really cool. Like they split us up into a big group. We went right in there, and they were like, "Who wants to volunteer to stay in one of these cells while everybody else starts going through the haunted house? You'll get left out whenever we feel like it, and
Oh.
then you have to go do the rest of it." Well, this guy behind me and his wife were like arguing about it because he wanted to do it, but like she didn't. And in that like little 10-second like squabble, the dude thought it was me and her. So he said, "You two, and oh yeah, you two behind us," which was the couple anyway. "You go into the cell and we'll go first." And I was like, "Dude, we were not even in this marital squabble. How
Oh,
did we get
no.
stuck with them in a cell?" So we did. We were locked in there. It was probably for like maybe like 5 minutes.
Oh.
But then they let us go, and it's like we're traveling through the penitentiary, but it's just the four of us compared to the 20 of us that got let
Right.
in all at one time. So it was super scary. And I think that the coolest part of the entire thing though was that we got to this place where you could get into a coffin,
Ooh.
and it was on a track, like on a and it would move. So it's like you got into this coffin, they shut you closed and they lock it.
Oh, they log it.
And then you're on this like little roller coaster while you're like
Oh
laying
my
in this
gosh, in a
coffin.
coffin?
It's just like you're going down, and then like you
Oh
make a
my god.
turn and you make another turn, and then you go down again, and then you like abruptly come to a stop, but like you can't get out. So sometimes the actors there will like leave you in it for a couple seconds
Mm.
longer or
Mhm.
whatever, and then they'll open up really quickly and like try to scare you. Well, we got to that point and I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm getting into this coffin. This is freaking awesome." And
Mhm.
they give you a choice to like walk around. So it's like I'm sitting in mine, she's sitting in hers because there's like two tracks. So we're like looking at each other, like ready to sit back and get locked into our coffins. And she goes, "Yeah, I'm out. I'll see you on the other side." And the actor was like, "Lay down." So I was like, "I'm doing this, but you're not doing this." And after I got out of my
Oh.
coffin, we were separated. I didn't even find her until we were almost done with the haunted house. So everything else I was going through by myself in this haunted penitentiary. And it was the cool I mean, it was the coolest thing, and I was like, "I will be back here one day." And that was
That's
probably like,
cool.
I wanna say like 2013, I think, 2013,
Okay.
2012, something like that. And
Mhm.
then the second time that I was back was just last year in October of 2023. I went again for my birthday, did the haunted house, and it was even better. They still
Oh,
had like the
wow.
coffin track, but it was
Yeah.
even better because the first time, like the first room that we went in, like I was still with like a group of people, but it
Mhm.
looked like this really long, like closet hallway or something. Like there was a door and you like went
Mm.
into it, but it
Mhm.
was a makeshift one. I'm the first person. Cause like as you could tell when we were at Penhurst, I'm like, I am in the front. I'm getting like the first view to everything. And it really
Oh
screwed
my god.
me on that
Not a
night
good thing.
because I'm in there and I turn around because it's a dead end. And I
Mhm.
did not like I didn't know that. So like I turn around, everybody's turned around, then the door slams, we get locked in, and from above us, the entire like little hallway starts filling with these large plastic balls. Our hands were up in the air like this, and the girl that was, like, in front of the person that I was with starts freaking out because
Oh,
apparently she's
no.
claustrophobic. She
Oh,
starts having a panic attack, and we were
no.
stuck in there for 7 minutes. I was gonna freak out because I mean, tiny spaces I don't really care, you
Mhm.
know, but she was making me freak out. Like, I was fine
Mm.
with it, I was, like, deep breathing through it, and when she starts
Oh,
having a panic
no.
attack, I was like, "Somebody get me the hell out of this place."
Yeah.
So it's like when I'm watching this episode back, like, that's all I could think about was, like, the panic sensation that I felt
Mm.
while I was, like, trapped underneath something and I couldn't get out of it, and I think that, like, I know Tanner mentions it in the episode too of, like, feeling, like, trapped in the RV, like it's a jail
Mhm.
cell, but that's
Yeah.
kind of how it was, like, I can't get out and I'm left at someone else's mercy to get me out. Um,
Yeah.
and as we'll discuss in the episode, like, I feel like that's a very central theme, obviously, right, for a jail is, like, that you're under someone
Mhm.
else, like, you have no real freedom, you have no real autonomy whatsoever, and, like, until I was put in that position where I literally had no choice but to wait and, like, that was predicated on somebody else, I don't ever wanna feel that again.
Mhm. Yeah. Like, haunted houses are so fun, though.
Absolutely,
Like,
110%.
so fun, but you have to learn every corner you go around, there's somebody there. So if you are standing away from that corner, and if you stop, everybody else stops behind you, and that person hiding behind that corner is like, "Where the frick are these people?" And they'll, like, look around. If you ever go to Toronto, Canada's Wonderland, Halloween Haunt, they do it at night, and they do all of these, like, haunted houses stuff, and, like, people dress up. They're not supposed to touch you, um, and I was doing that the whole night. I was just, like, pissing everybody off, all the workers, and they're like, "Dude," but some people, like, sometimes it's so small, like, I've had people, like, one girl, like, rushed out at me and, like, smacked her freaking, like, jaw on me, and she was like a zombie or something, and she was trying to scare me, and she could just hear her go, "Oh," and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "I went in too hard, I'm sorry." And, like,
You're
people
like,
say
"Yeah,
random things.
back it up, man."
Back it up, and there was, like, a Halloween horror one in Calgary here, and we had to, like, sign a waiver, and
Mm,
the one guy was trying to scare us and be like, "Oh, an NFL player, like, he passed out," and it was like a zombie maze, and the friend that I went with, we were just, like, side by side, and you could tell they were trying to, like, split us up,
mm.
so eventually someone, like, wrapped their arms around me, picked me up, and then just started, like, running backwards to split us
Oh,
up.
hell no.
Yeah, they were so annoyed with me, and I'm just like, "This is a video game. Duck and dodge, duck and dodge," and I'm
They're
like
like, "We need to get this bitch outside, like,
yeah,
you're
and
done here."
yeah, it like, so fun, like, I need to go back to another one, and that's why they make you sign a waiver because they were allowed to touch you at this one, and I was like, "Oh, dang, what are they gonna do?" Not expecting, like, this giant zombie man to pick me up and just be like, "Bye, Felicia," and, like, yeet me back.
Mm-mm, no, mm-mm, no, it, like, reminds me of a haunted house where I, like, almost punched this dude in the face that was, like, in a clown suit, like, I don't
Oh,
do them, I don't do clowns, like, there were all these other extenuating factors in the terms of where I was in the room that I was. I'm saving this story for another episode, so I'm not getting into it,
mhm,
but I really, like, I wanted to put hands on him, like, really, really badly to the point where, like, when we met where we did in the room that I was in, I was like, "You better step to the side or we're gonna have a problem." And,
mhm.
like, dude just, like, turned this way, like, motioned that way, and, like, let me pass because I don't know if he could just, like, tell my fear vibes
Mhm.
and that I really was, like, not in a position to be fucked with at that point.
Yeah.
He just kinda, like, let me go, which was nice. And
Mhm.
the not nice thing though is that the spirits weren't so nice to the crew this time around, specifically Dakota. And I know that everyone that's listening has probably already watched this episode. But there's
Mhm.
a lot that happens.
A lot, and a lot that happens, like, from the jump once they get in. But before we deep dive into this episode, we are going to get into the history of the location.
Yes, my favorite part.
And in 1863, West Virginia was born after seceding from Virginia during the Civil War. This meant that the amenities and institutions were few and far between. It took 3 years of lobbying to open a penitentiary after 9 inmates from the ill equipped and overrun county jail escaped. Just 12 miles south of Wheeling, the capital of West Virginia at the time was 10 acres of land for purchase, where Moundsville Penitentiary was built. Adjacent to the land sat the Grave Creek Mound, the largest mound in North America, which was once said to be an ancient Native American burial ground.
From 1886 to 1887, the north and the south gates were constructed and connected by a four-story tower. The 82.5-foot length, 352.5-foot width, and 24-foot high structure was solely constructed by inmate labor. Its Gothic revival architecture was inspired by Joliet Prison in Illinois, built entirely of stone that represented great strength, intimidation, and also a sense of dread for what awaits them. Chuck Gent, a former Moundsville prison guard for 9 years, reported you had to be animalistic to survive there, and that some people would kick, scream, and cry while being brought to the prison because of its reputation.
Crazy. I would like to make note that this prison, it's so like cool looking. Like just the
It's
structure of it.
gorgeous. Like,
Like,
it is walking or, like, driving up to it because Tanner even says in the episode, it's like a city block long, and it
yeah,
it really is, and the craziest part is that, like, it's literally in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Like, that's what
yeah.
surrounds it. It's just like as if you were r driving into any unsuspecting neighborhood and just pops up this huge penitentiary.
It also like looked like almost like castle-like, just the way it was built.
It's that
But
Gothic revival type
yeah.
style. It looks very, like, European too.
Yeah, kind of out of place, but the
Mhm.
structure also held living quarters for the warden and his family, as well as both male and female inmates. Originally, the South Hall had 224 cells and recreation area called the Sugar Shack. The North Hall had a kitchen, dining room, hospital, and a chapel. They added hundreds of more cells to the North Hall in the 1890s, and in 1929, they expanded again, doubling its size. At the peak of its capacity, it held 2,000 inmates, and cells would hold nearly three prisoners in just a 5 by 7 foot cell. It was one of the top 10 most violent correctional facilities in the country, hosting the state's most notorious and dangerous criminals. Every section of the penitentiary has been a witness to a murder, and 1 year, the North Hall cell block saw more murders than any other prison in America. However, the prisoners weren't the only ones who committed these unspeakable acts.
In the 1880s, Superintendent John E. Pick would torture inmates on the kicking jenny. The kicking jenny is an instrument of torture. Inmates would be stripped naked and bent over the half rainbow shaped device with their feet fastened to the floor with ropes while they lay on the rainbow shaped device, hands tied at the other end. Their bodies could be extended so much that even a slight pull in the wrong direction looked like it would rip them in half. After they were secured in this torture device, the abuser would take a 4 foot long leather strap, soak it in vinegar and salt water, and whip their bodies until one of two things happened. The abuser either ran out of stamina or the inmate was near death. A captain at the prison witnessed this cruelty. His name was W.E. Wilkerson. He was questioned by an interviewer of the National Enquirer in 1886, and his stories will send shivers down your spine. A line from the article read, "The captain's story of the life of the unfortunates of this prison and their cruel, brutish treatment were one series of horrors. And even if 1/3 of the allegations were true, which there seems no reason to doubt them, then the West Virginia pen is hell on earth."
Yikes. Captain Wilkerson would sing like a bird after his resignation and gave fellow officers names who could verify his tales. He was asked to hide all the torture devices during routine inspections, and he noted that if prisoners did not fully finish their tasks, they would be beaten and bloodied until the sight of them would make Captain Wilkerson physically sick. One story in particular of John G. Roberts details that the superintendent Peck beat him so badly on the kicking Jenny that he bore scars from June until December that year. Captain Wilkerson believed Peck would have killed Roberts if he hadn't interfered, and when asked if Roberts was still alive, Wilkerson said he's dead and buried in the walls.
That's so scary. Like,
Mm.
institutions, like we've reviewed already in this
Hmm.
season, they don't come without some sort of abuse of power,
Right.
and a lot of the times that meant that any of these people that had a loss of autonomy would some way or somehow be treated very poorly.
Hmm.
And at this penitentiary, treating you poorly could mean that when you died there, you were buried in its walls.
Yeah.
That's super creepy. During its 129-year operation, 94 men were executed, 85 of them hangings, and 9 of them by electrocution in the electric chair named Old Sparky. 1,000 deaths occurred on the property, and for a span of 18 months, at least 2 murders occurred each month in that time. One of the penitentiary's most notorious murders was that of R.D. Wall in 1979. R.D. was sentenced to life in prison for rape. The inmates noticed that R.D.'s friendly relationship with the guards granted him a lot more privileges, and the resentment and the revenge among other inmates grew. It didn't take long for him to be labeled a snitch. Boring that name came with great consequences in prison. 3 inmates jumped R.D. in the boiler room, stabbing him incessantly with homemade shivs, slitting his throat, and chopping off his fingertips one by one until he died.
Ugh, yikes. Another inmate, William or Red Snyder, leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, was the most violent inmate housed at this penitentiary. He committed multiple murders and was sentenced to living his final days in the North Hall cell. On a sunny day in November of 1992, inmates were let out of their cells to congregate. During this time, betrayal occurred when Snyder's friend Rusty Lassiter came to his cell and stabbed him 37 times with a sharpened piece of steel he took from his cell bed. When guards finally arrived, his cell was said to be drenched with blood. Another area of the prison, called the Sugar Shack, was notable for its brutality as well. Inmates were put here during stormy weather to exercise and to engage in recreation. However, supervision was almost non existent, and inmates inflicted one terrible act after another onto their fellow criminals here, earning the Sugar Shack its nickname for being, as what some of the inmates might have called it, a sweet place to be.
2 severe riots took place, one in 1973 and the other in 1986. During the 1986 riot, 12 guards were held hostage, beaten, and sodomized. In 1973, 40 inmates held 5 guards hostage and demanded better conditions. 2 inmates were stabbed and another was killed during this time. This wasn't the first or the last time that prisoners advocated for better conditions. Since the beginning of its institution, prisoners petitioned guards, senators, and the governor for better care. It was said that zoos were cleaner and safer than conditions at this prison. Freezing temperatures in the winter, blazing heat reaching 120 degrees in upper cell blocks each summer, and pests like lice, roaches, and rats lived among the inmates. At one point, state police officers would fish for rats with peanut butter on a fishing pole to pass the time.
Oh my god, crazy. I couldn't imagine like living somewhere that is cleaner and safer than a zoo. Like, or the zoo is safer, sorry.
It's
Like,
just like that picture, like that mental image. Like, I'm sure
mhm,
everybody at some point in time has been to a zoo,
mhm.
and thinking that humans lived in lesser conditions for
Mhm.
sometimes like 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. And just, like, in such a confined space and no supervision in some areas,
The most
but
violent facility in the country.
in the country, and
Wild.
it's just so crazy to, like, I couldn't even imagine. But, after the riot in 1986, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled that the confinement to a 5 by 7-foot cell consisted as cruel and unusual punishment, that cells were meant to only be slept in and rather than lived in. Population was decreased and inmates transferred elsewhere until the prison closed 9 years later in 1995, and
Which
I
again,
was a baby still.
yeah, like 5 years old for me, like, that was not that long ago. So,
Mm-mm,
knowing that after 120 some years of operation, it never really got any better.
mm-mm,
Like, things didn't really change, and I think that
no.
that's probably, like, the saddest fact because if the Supreme Court in and around that time, like late 80s, early 90s, was still saying that this is cruel and unusual punishment,
Mhm,
conditions never got better, clearly.
mm-mm. No, it's almost like, why bother at this point? They're criminals, like, who cares kinda thing, and at the same time, like, there are some criminals that, like, do deserve to have life in prison, and, like, why should you live a good life after you've taken away another that didn't need to happen kinda thing, or, like, it's, like, such a gray area as well, like, it all depends on what they've done,
Well, and you
how
think
it was
like
done, like
so many notorious criminals were here, a lot of them for assaults, murder. Like they were inflicting real physical, emotional, psychological harm on
Mhm,
society. And then bringing that energy with them and like their character, right?
mhm.
Their energy. They're in these 5 by 7 cells. Like it's literally like no much bigger than like a picnic top table. You
Well,
know,
yeah,
like it's
like
so small. And like I've been in Red Cell
mhm, right,
and like I could sit with my entire back to the wall. I'm a 5'2". So I could sit on where his bed would have been, my back to the wall, and extend my feet out the entire way. And there may only be a foot until I hit the other side of the wall. And I'm a
yeah,
small person. And they would
mhm,
have up to 3 people
3, like,
in one cell room.
even one person, like,
Oh, one
imagine
person, I think you'd go crazy in there.
yeah, like, even, how for us guys are so much bigger, like, if you're, like, 6'4", 6'5", like, that's not enough space, like and it was only supposed to be an area to sleep in. Pouring another drink.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers. I actually should just top up at this point.
Do
La
it to it.
la la la.
I know, just, like, even thinking about what that could have been like and, like, having been there and just sitting there, it would I don't know, I just, like, can't even describe, like, the feeling. It's kind of
Mhm,
like the same like, anytime that you walk into, like, a really, like, historical place or something that has, like, so much energy, if you're a little bit more, like, sensitive to it, like, I think that I am to to those energy, you just feel them.
mhm,
And all of that negative energy that was brought in there, and then having a murder or 2 occur, like, every month for, like, 18 months straight, and knowing that one cell block in this prison, just the North Hall, had
mhm,
more murders than any other prison at all total in the country for an entire year, like, that creates a lot of negative energy too, which
mhm,
makes sense why this place is so active and it's
mhm.
incredibly violent itself, even in the afterlife.
Yeah, like, I'm wondering too, just because of that Native American burial mound that's literally across the street, like, is that, like giving off something as well. We don't really, like, hear anything else about it in the episode.
Mhm.
Like,
They
there's
have it,
no
like, memorialized, like, you
Yeah.
can, like, walk up to it and there's, like, a plaque and it explains a
Mhm.
lot of things, but I think other than that, I don't really know what else, you know what I mean, like, might be done or
Mhm.
so I'm sure that that is some sort of connection, has some sort of reason why the energy is the way that it is there.
Yeah, like, almost like a lead line
Yeah.
kinda thing, like, it's like, I wonder if anyone's even, like, been there at night just to investigate, see what happens. Like, everyone's gone into the prison. I think I said this in another episode, but, like, have you been outside to, like, investigate? Like, what happens outside?
Yeah,
Especially
and
if
it
it's
would
a
be
burial
so
ground.
weird because, like, it's literally, like, in the middle of a neighborhood, and I know that
Yeah.
some neighbors well, and I feel like we always go back to Ghost Adventures at some point in time in one of these episodes, but,
Mhm. This is
like,
true.
they've gone there as well, and I'm pretty sure, like, Zach approaches an old man that's just, like, sitting on his porch minding his own business and asks him about it, and it's because, like, I could you could literally sit on your porch and watch the, like, prison yard if you wanted to.
Oh.
So it's like there are, it's kind of like in this, like, U shape, and then and then it sort of, like, encloses upon itself, but then there's, like, this big gated area, but, like, you can physically see it all 360 ways around. So not only could they see it while it's in operation, but since it's
Mhm.
been closed since '95, now people see more ghostly apparitions and supernatural type activity sitting from their porch. Like, Dakota even teases that, like, one haunted account where someone was, like, physically burned by a spirit here to the
Right.
team whenever they're asking kind of, like, for a hint about things, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of haunted history, like, other accounts include, like, cell door slamming, footsteps running down the halls, audible screams, a cold finger running across your neck, which is said to really happen in the sugar shack. The
Ugh.
feeling that, like, you're never really alone, that someone's watching you is this constant feeling. Shadow figures, light anomalies, EVPs can be captured too. And one tour guide even shared that if you antagonize something in this prison, don't be surprised
Mhm.
when it antagonizes you back.
Oh, 100%, and just, like, personalities of being in a prison. Like, they're gonna mess with you, like, no matter what, whether out of boredom, whether out of aggression, whether they want something out of it, a
Oh, it's
trade.
testing boundaries.
Oh, 100%, especially with, like, those accusations of, like, rape. Like, usually if you go into a prison like that because you've done that, you're, like, number 1 target. If you've done anything to a woman or a child, still to this day, you're the number 1 target kinda thing. Um, it's yeah, I couldn't imagine being in a place like that with so many people, like, no like, there's gonna be no doubt you're gonna feel like there's just this heaviness and all these eyes are around you, and again, I'm sorry, the duck has made it into the episode, people.
Ducks are all he's always gonna be there because he's
I
just, like,
have
what
to.
keeps you grounded.
The ground is getting kinda dirty, though, but
Well,
I am a wiggle worm.
and I think too, like, the speaking of, like, grounding, I think that, like, the pit stops along the way, I mean,
Mhm.
I won't give away kind of, like, why they did the pit stops because I feel like that those disclosures are just for the Fear fam, so
Yeah.
sorry if you want exclusive information like that, you're gonna have to join the Fear Club. So, but
Mhm.
I think that those, like, pit stops do, like, ground them as well because it's
Mhm.
something different, it's breaking up kind of like the monotonous of like the travel and then going through a haunted location. And
Mhm.
they kind of have like two pit stops in one because we see like Chelsea and Tanner like paddle boating around this pond with like a little bit of ducks, and like Dakota's like giving everybody the skinny about the location, the audience anyway. And in the RV, he starts asking questions and being inquisitive, right? He's like, what
Mhm.
have you noticed that's changed about you since we started this road trip? Which I think is really good to ask because you're
Mhm.
checking in with your crew. You want to know where their mentality is when you're about to go into this gigantic location. I mean, they've gone into others that are like similar in terms of like a prison and it being really massive and whatnot,
Mhm.
but, like, with the violent history and all of the really, like, violent accounts too for the hauntings, like, I think even Chelsea says at some point in time that she doesn't know if she's, like, ready for this place. It's gonna be, like, the scariest place that maybe she's ever gone to. So it
Yeah.
makes sense to check in and, Alex is saying, like, "Hey, I'm having nightmares. I'm getting really uncomfortable, like, feelings, like, it's impacting how I sleep." Tanner's
Mhm.
noticing all of his bodily changes, like, he's feeling more, like, tense up, and he gets, like, shaky, especially when they go to sleep alone, and he's more confident when they're in a group, but he just feels like they're still stuck, like, living in this jail cell, which kind of, like, foreshadows, like, what they do find out that they actually are going to Moundsville.
I thought that was
Um,
so funny when it's
right?
just like, "How does it feel, guys?" And Tanner's like, "Oh, like, this RV is starting to feel like a tiny little jail cell." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Does he know where he's going?"
Sometimes
Like,
I wonder about it, like, I know that their whole premise is, like, not knowing, but
Mhm.
sometimes I just wonder, like, do you have an inkling or, like, did somebody let it slip earlier or something? I don't really know.
Like, clearly their phones aren't, like, taken away from them. So it's
Right.
just like, look out the window, you see a road sign, Google is right at your fingertips. Like, is there some
Like, maybe they
rule?
made a pact with themselves or something that said, like,
Maybe.
even if you're curious, don't guess, don't Google,
But,
don't
like, doesn't
whatever.
he sleep in that, like, top little portion, like, above where the driver is? You can easily, like, hide that and be like,
I
"Haunted
don't know. They might
locations
just
in
have to, like
Moundsville."
they might have their integrity, and be like, "Okay, we're not going to do this." And, of course,
Maybe.
they have their own producers on the show, right? Like, now,
Mhm.
I don't know how they do it because, like, someone literally I don't know if, like, maybe Connor does it, but, like, someone literally has to, like, make this plan be logistical. Um,
Mhm.
but, like, they had producers on the show, so that was probably easier to keep information from each other than it
Maybe.
would now when they have to produce pretty much everything by themselves. Um
Mhm.
but going into West Virginia Penitentiary, like, Dakota knows that everybody's feeling the effects of these overnights, and, he wants to do something fun. So they end up doing something that they haven't really done, but it's still challenging.
Mhm. It's still challenging. I don't know if I could do this. They head to Grandview, which is like an outdoor adventure park, where Tanner, Chelsea, and Dakota take a ride on like a giant swing. And it's 100 feet in the air. And I find it also funny that Tanner makes note that he's like, there's like, you could drive up here. Like, we don't have to walk up here. And Dakota's like, yeah, I know, but like,
We're gonna
let's
do it
go.
anyway.
We're going to do it anyway.
Mhm.
Oh, what a guy. But
Mm,
yeah, I don't like, I'm not big on heights. Like, I can like
no.
fly in an airplane and it's like completely fine. That's like a different level, but like I've bungee jumped, and where I bungee jumped, it was like a bachelorette weekend. There was like 10 of us, and before I signed up, I thought all 12 of us were going to bungee jump, and we were automatically signing up the bride to be to surprise her. Like, "Hey, this is what we're doing." Turns out we get there, and me, one of my other friends, were the only ones that signed up to bungee jump, along with who we volunteered bride to be. And we were like, "Shit."
Yeah, no
Immediately, like,
freaking way.
no freaking way. And, like, this was, like, a place we were gonna do, like, whitewater rafting and, like, camping, so we immediately, like, throw up our tents and we're like, "We're drinking." And we, like, took a couple shots, and to get up to, like, the tower, there's nobody up there with you, and you're climbing up these tiny metal rungs. And my friend Kaylee was above me, and she had like flip-flops on, and the thing that came out of my mind was like, and you're in like, I don't know, like a caged like ladder, and I'm just like, if you slipped and fell, we're dead. Like,
Yeah,
if
like,
she
she's
slipped
taking
on her,
you out.
yeah, and all the way up to the top, there's nobody along the way. We're not, like,
Mm.
hooked in or anything. So I was just like, we're fucked. Like, if you slip, you're number one, I'm number two, and Hillary's number three, and we're toast, and like, no one's
Yeah.
getting married. So,
No,
and
they
then
got
we,
funerals to plan.
exactly. And then we get to the top, and of course, bride to be, she is such a badass. She is all ready to go. She goes, she makes it look easy. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to go next. And stupid me, I wore, like, gladiator sandals, and whoever
Mm.
doesn't know what gladiator sandals are, they, like, run across the top of your foot and they hook around your ankle. So when you're bungee jumping, sometimes you don't get hooked in by, like, the chest, you get hooked around your ankles, and I got hooked around my ankles.
Hell no.
Yeah, and this was, like, in Ottawa. Yeah, and all I could hear was this buzzing, and I was like, "Oh my god, there's bees around me." And the guy's like, "No, that's a drone filming you." And I was like, "Great, I'm being filmed right now." And I'm like looking down, I'm like, "I can't do this." And whoever wants to bungee jump, don't wear a regular bra if you're a girl. Wear a sports bra. Don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes, please.
You're like, "I need to compress these things or they're gonna, like, come up and
Oh
hit me in the jaw or the eye, and I'm gonna
my
have a black and blue eye."
Oh my god. So, I was, like, so hesitant. The guy was just like, "I'm gonna count down, and you're gonna jump." And I'm like, "'Kay, okay, good, let's do this." And he goes, "5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!" And I was just like, "That's too fast. That's too fast, man." And he's
Redo,
like,
redo.
"Redo." And then I'm just like, I think it took me, like, 5 times, and I was like, just push me." And he's like, "Becca, I can't push you or else you'll sue me." And I'm like, "But I won't, I
You're like,
promise."
"I signed a waiver that said I won't do that."
Exactly, right? And, eventually, like, I just did it and almost gave the guys down below a show. I literally had to hold on to the goods,
Oh, no.
and I ended up because of my gladiator sandals, so because of, like, the pullback from jumping, it, like, pulled hard on my stupid sandals, and, I got down and everyone's just like, "You have a massive bruise on your foot." 'Cause it just went right and, like, I think there's, like, a bone out of place. I haven't ever gotten X-rays, this was years ago.
My gosh.
Yeah, there's, like, a slight bump there, and then my next friend, Kaylee, who went, she, like, requested, like, not to get dunked, so it was above water, and they're just like, "Get dunked or not get dunked," and she went in the water, her flip-flops went
What
flying.
made you be like, "Let me sign up for this?" Like, because you didn't wanna be the oddball out because you thought everybody else was doing it and you're like, "Sure, I'll just jump in with everyone else,"
Oh
or
my
what?
god. This freaking it was so fun. It was one of the funnest places I've ever been to, but it wasn't like it was a little run down. Even,
Mm.
like, that night, we're supposed to go whitewater rafting the next day, and, yeah, the some of the whitewater rafting guides were drinking with us because there was a bar there, and they were drinking. Some of them were one guy was literally snorting booze off the bar. Like, yeah, they were buck wild up there.
I'm
And
like, in my brain, I'm like, "This is unsafe."
it was oh my god, I was just like, "Are" I literally went up to him, I'm like, "Are you, like, whitewater rafting tomorrow?" And he's like, "Yeah, I might be your guide tomorrow." And I was like, "Dear God, I hope
Dude, I have
not."
been friends with so many, like, river rats over the years
Yeah.
that, like, most of the time, I would say, like, 98% of the time that I've ever went whitewater rafted, which has been a lot because I used to go, like, every weekend when I was a summer, like, camp counselor. I will tell you that they're either, like, high or drunk, you just don't know because that's how they operate, like,
Mhm.
that's their baseline, and I don't know how they do it, but they could get you down, like, high on acid better than you could ever do, I'm sure, with somebody that was even sober, and that
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
very, like, it's like a crazy claim, but being around it as much as I have, like, that's absolutely 110% accurate, and I
Yeah.
would rather whitewater raft than anything, which is weird because I was afraid of it for so long,
Mhm.
after having a really, like, gnarly, awful experience, but that was, like, in my,
Oh.
like, kind of adventure challenge by choice type days whenever I worked for a summer camp, and we used to, like, zip line, like, I had to rappel,
Ugh.
it was very, like I don't know. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't like heights either. And then I went to Costa Rica, I wanna say in, like, 2015 or 16,
Mhm.
and we decided to zip line, and it was 350 feet in the air,
Ugh.
and I was zip lining, like, literally atop of the jungle in Costa Rica, which was super cool.
Super cool, yeah.
I think that I have, like, maybe a 5-second snapshot of memory of that
Mhm.
because I was so scared, I think I've repressed all of the rest. Like, I know
Blacked
that at
out.
one point in time, like, you get up there and there's, like, 7 different routes that you take
Oh.
until you get to the end. So, like, you go and, like, after your one route is done, then you, like, clip off and clip into another one and then go to this next one, and
Mhm.
there's only, like, every 3 or, like, every 2 that you have the option to get down, and it's, like, huge, like, you literally have to, like, staple climb it down and, like, lobster claw your whole way back
Oh,
down, which is, like, obviously, like,
no.
super scary anyway,
Yeah.
and I was just like, I didn't know that, like, I didn't know that there were, like, 7 different, like, installations to go,
Yeah.
so whenever I was, like, done with the first one, I asked them, I was like, "Okay, like, how do I mean, what do I do from here?" Like, I thought that I would be at a place where, like, I could just walk down some stairs, like, I'm over, and he was like, "Well, you got 6 more to go." I said, "What?"
Shut the fuck up.
The whole thing took, like, 35 minutes to do because,
Oh.
like, they're super long too, and you have, like, a control as well in terms of, like, putting your brake on. So you could put a
Okay, yeah.
brake on as well, but, like, if you do it too much when you're nearing the end, you'll
Mhm.
stop early before the platform, and then someone has to come get you.
No.
So the
No, no,
entire
no,
time I'm like
no.
350 feet in the air, the jungle is below me. I'm hot as balls because I hated Costa Rica because it was so humid and don't have anything air conditioned. Our hotels didn't have air conditioning. I'm in a fucking bungalow with a bunch of bugs everywhere. I couldn't even flush the freaking toilet paper. And I'm like, I am in cultural shock. Someone send me on a plane back to Colorado like
I'm dead.
ASAP. And so I'm completely uncomfortable, pushed
Mhm.
out of my comfort zone, and I'm sitting on this platform 350 feet in the air. It was fun from what I can recollect after the fact, like after I got through it, but it was like getting through it first that
Mhm.
made it like miserable for a second. And I feel like when they're on this giant swing, this
Mhm.
is my LOL moment of the whole episode because I don't think anything funny happens after that, to be quite honest. But they're like sitting up there. It's like this 3-seater, and Dakota's filming with like a GoPro on like a big giant like selfie looking stick. And Tanner's sitting there with his little helmet on. He's like securing his glasses to his face so they
Wow.
don't fall off.
Wow,
And
no
like
one leaves those.
Chelsea like has been dubbed the person that
Oh, I wouldn't wanna be that person.
no, I'm not gonna pull the trip thing to make me go. I'm not doing it. So she's
Mm-mm.
dubbed that. She's terrified.
Mhm.
Dakota is like super vocal about the fact that he's really nervous. And Tanner's
Always
super
focused.
excited. So like Chelsea's frozen in fear. Dakota's like, holy shit, I can't believe I signed us up to do this in the first place. And Tanner's just cheesing from ear to
Yeah.
ear. And like when she finally lets go and they're actually swinging, Dakota and Chelsea don't move. They're like frozen. And fucking Tanner is sitting here like cruising his legs back and forth like he's a toddler getting pushed on the swing by his mom who promised him to get candy after the park.
Oh
Like
my
he's just
god.
la-di-da. Like I
La-di-da.
lost my mind. And I don't even think that I would notice some of these more intricate things if we weren't watching them back and like
Mhm.
taking notes and just like looking at everything. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is starkly different. But it was, I mean, it was hysterical.
Oh
And,
god, I
you
didn't
know,
even notice that. Cause like,
so
all I
funny.
remember is, like, Chelsea's, like, cause in the RV, Dakota is wow,
Pop
I'm
another one off, Becca.
might as well, people. Jeepers
It's
creepers,
okay because
Batman.
I'm gonna have a pee break at some point in time. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to use SpongeBob footage of me anymore whenever I'm taking a break. It's not 52 hours or whatever it is later, okay? We need to find something different.
One day later. Well, I was pretty proud of, like, the video I was editing today because I was like, for all you gamers out there, I have been watching grown men play video games. I've grown up with them, and then I was just like, "You know what? I'm gonna put that well, for all you guys out there who have played Metal Gear Solid, you know that sound. I put it in there and I was just so proud of it. I was like, Instagram story.
I just think it's so funny that, like, and I don't, our listeners probably don't know this. They probably think, like, oh, Brie knows exactly what's going to go out on drop day every Thursday. Guess what, guys? No, I fucking don't.
No, she
Like,
doesn't.
no, I don't. I just have this blind faith in Becca that she will produce something that I'm going to be like, yeah. So I don't even remember what episode it was, but it was like the first time I took a pee break. She's going to insert something really funny after this. And I'm going to kind of be like, really? Really, bitch? Really? But she will anyway because I am gonna pee. And when I watched that back the first time, she didn't even tell me she was putting it in there. And I'm like watching it back. I'm like, oh, like, how did she do this? And I see it and I was like, this bitch. Like, and then I laughed really hard afterwards because I was like, that was genius. But at the time, I was like, oh, she didn't even tell me. So now ever since then, I think it's just like this funny game that we play where like I'll get this notification and it was like, spooky happy hour mentioned you in their story, or like, it's drop day and I'm watching and I was like, what surprises am I in store for today?
I love surprising people because I am mainly the content person because you create the script and all this stuff and do the history, and I am the Instagram person. So yeah, you weren't happy with that last story that I posted.
Totally accurate. I can't blame you. Like, that's my thing though. It's like, if it's accurate and it's funny, I don't give a shit. Like, that's hysterical and I'll roll with it. But if it wasn't, then I'd be like, what are you doing? But most
I'm
of
gonna
it
call you
is.
out.
Yes, most of it is. And you will, and that's fine because I feel like I'm like the first one to be like, "Yep, I'll take accountability for these things," because it is funny and I do some of those. So if you don't know what Becca's talking about at this point in time, you're gonna miss it anyway. But check out our Instagram and our stories because we do post some funny stuff on there. And with that,
Yeah.
this is gonna be my pee break. So it could be your pee break too, audience. I'm sure you take us whenever you're going, which, we appreciate listening wherever you are. And we're going to take a short break.
Yeah, we're gonna do a short break and I will insert something hilarious.
Can't wait to find out with y'all when this episode
Woohoo!
drops on the next Thirsty Thursday.
Welcome to the editing corner. I'll
This
get
is
Dakota
Spooky
and
Happy
Connor
Hour
on my
after hours.
side.
Move along. Move along.
There's no way
Right.
I'm getting through the rest of this episode or I won't be able to drink, and I want to drink. So
Right? Okay, like people, this is raw and real. We want you to see the real stuff. This is us.
the
Welcome
amount
to
of
the
times that Becca texts me before we do this, it says, "Don't forget to pee."
Okay.
And this only happens when we have drinks before Spooky Happy Hour. When we pre-drink filming, this is when this happens. But when we're good little girls who don't do that beforehand and we just like
Who does
cheers the
that?
first one together, it doesn't. So, but we know this. We know this.
Like, yeah,
Here I go
remember when
again.
I talked about earlier, like I used to pre-drink before the pre-drink. I kind of had a drink before we started. So, because I was just like rewatching the episode just to like get all the deets in there, and I was like, you know
It
what? I could
happens.
use a glass of the old White Claws.
Heck yeah. Well, I was like
Why not?
finalizing notes for today's episode. I was like drinking a beer. Shout out Victory Brewing. Their Sour Monkey 9.5% alcohol. It's it's banging. It's
Sour
banging.
monkey. I like it.
It's really awesome. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming where we're at
Back to what
the
we talk about.
where we're at Grandview Outdoor Adventure Park, where
Mhm.
the crew is at an overlook and Dakota tells them that the location is in sight. They can't
Oh
find
my
it because they
gosh.
don't know what the hell that they're looking
I
for,
love
but Dakota sees it.
Yeah, I love looking back on that because you can see it in his face because he's like, "I know where it is." It's like, "I
Mhm.
spy with my little eye down there." And Chelsea's just taking in the views and she's just like, "Oh, such like a beautiful place. Like how can there be something so like bad down there?" And
It's
Dakota's
like you
just
see this huge structure that does look like a
Mhm.
castle, and it's really,
Yeah.
like, ominous looking, but it makes sense for
Mhm.
them to do, like, the packet read at that point in time. But I
Mhm.
think, like, I mean, besides, like, all of the evidence that they capture that we're gonna go over, I think one of the coolest parts about this episode is the way that they do kind of, like, honor people that have passed
Mhm.
that were at the penitentiary, because while they're on the road, they end up meeting this, author of pretty much all tales of Moundsville Penitentiary. So they're reflecting on
Mhm.
the history and the information that they've processed so far from the packet read, and um the the cemetery I think is just like a perfect place to start because it
Mhm.
reminds you about the end of things. And
Mhm.
they have to carry some of that with them while they're in a place like this. And so the author that they meet, her name's Sherry Brake, and they meet at Whitegate Cemetery. And she wanted them to meet there because they could pay homage to all those forgotten and unclaimed bodies of the prisoners. And this cemetery is a little bit different because they don't have gravestones, but they do have sort of like license plates with an inmate number, date of birth, the death date. Sometimes their names are on there, sometimes that for some reason that they're not. But it reminds me of this cemetery in Colorado that's kind of
Mhm.
like the same, and it's small like that, but it has kind of the license plate gravestones, and it's super sad.
Yeah.
Just to see it that way, like just something different than a normal like cemetery or mausoleum.
Mhm.
Um, and I just think that like that's like a perfect setting for them before they go into this location.
Mhm. Yeah, it was kinda like the way she described it, and you can even see them, like, blowing in the wind. It's almost just like a piece of metal holding them up, and they're just, like, kinda, like, drilled into this post. It's just like, "Here they are." At least they aren't, like, just random numbers like we talked about in another episode, like Eloise, like, they have just a number, no date of birth. At least they have something like that. And she states that she's been going to this prison for like 20 years. And she highlighted like one particular experience where she got spit on from a cell above her. And she also states like where it came from, people don't have access to that spot up there. So like it wouldn't be like why some random person would go up there and go patoo like on you unless you're homeless.
Right.
But that is just, like, the wildest thing, like, for paranormal wise, like, how does that even happen? Like, how do
Yeah,
you
there's not
even
so many
create.
accounts of things like that, like pushing,
Yeah.
shoving, whispering in your ear, like feeling some sort of physical touch, sure, maybe. But
Mhm.
having some sort of like substance produced and to be on
Yeah.
you, that's definitely very different for sure.
Very weird. I also thought it was crazy that they just, like, panned over all the license plates, and someone was named Harley Quinn.
I saw
Who
that too. I was like, "What?"
What? Like, right? Even though, like, it would have been a well, were there women at this prison too?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's
I
crazy
think there was,
because
like, a shorter point in time, like, they had their own
yeah.
ward, and it was only for so many years, and then they used that ward for something different, and they ended up transferring
Mhm.
the women out of there, and it eventually ended up to be, like, more men.
Right.
But yeah, that was strange.
I was like, "That's so weird for, like, who anyone is, like, a Batman fan, like, Harley Quinn goes to, like, Arkham Asylum, and that place is full of crazies, like, you've got all the bad guys there," and I was just like, "How freaking ironic is that to have a Harley
Yeah,
Quinn
because,
at
like,
this prison?"
the characters,
Yeah.
that are, like, laid to rest there, like, even one of them, she kinda goes into a little bit more of detail about his name was, like, Eddie Fielder, and he committed
Mhm.
suicide in the prison, and another prisoner was actually put into his cell after Eddie had died, and he reported that he saw the apparition of Eddie hanging in their cell. So she
Wha
kind of, like, cautioned that, like, "Hey, some of these spirits might still be, like, living their life sentence or living their sentence even like at
Mhm.
like without parole, even after they
Mhm.
like have been into the afterlife. This is where they're either stuck or choose to be." And she gets like a lot of really strong feelings when she's there, more of like hate and some of like
Mhm.
anger, a little bit of remorse as well. So it's kind of like the spectrum of feelings that you would probably expect to feel in a prison anyway. But
Mhm.
like you said, she's been going there so long that she has that, like, emotional connection
Mhm.
to it as well. So hearing her stories before they even went in, I think was also really helpful because they like
Yeah.
to hear those interviews with other people that have gone before them because not only do they have the history and other people's haunted accounts, but to talk to somebody like face to face and to be in an area like the cemetery where you're seeing it
Mhm.
before you even get to the pen, like you're seeing it and you're taking it all in. And it's really great, I think, to have that frame of reference before they go.
Mhm. And even when they start rolling up in the RV, Alex kinda, like, notices Dakota is, like, super tense, and he's just like, "I've never seen you this tense before." Like, and this seems to be almost like a reoccurring thing with Dakota. I don't know if it's just, like, every time he gets to a location, he verbally says, like, "I'm nervous," or "I'm scared," or, like, at least he admits it at this
Mhm.
point, but, even, like, Tanner's anxiety is, like, high because the pictures just, like, don't do it any justice from, like, physically seeing this giant location.
Yeah, when they roll up on it, I think they're just like jaw drops because they're like,
Mhm,
wow, like we've read the packet, we've seen the prisoners in the cemetery, we've talked to people, we've listened to all of the haunted accounts, and wow, this massive structure that really kind of like appears out of nowhere.
mhm,
Because you like turn into the neighborhood and then you just see it, and it's almost like it kind of like appears in front of you out of nowhere.
mhm,
And it's shocking and it's really impressive, and you get like starstruck kind of like by the beauty of the architecture, and
mhm.
then the history and everything else that you know slowly starts to like creep in and kind of like
Yeah.
dampen that. And so of course, like as massive as a location that it is, as soon as they get in there and set up the gear room, they want to be like, okay, where are we going? They
Mhm,
set out a whole like map of where they want to go, and sincerely, as soon as they walk in, stuff starts to happen. Like something clangs,
mhm.
like something was either being thrown or it was like a cell door slamming. And Chelsea screams and runs away because that's what happens in the season with her. Like she is just starting out, so she does those things, and
Mhm,
yet it happens again. They try to like kind of recreate the sound, but they couldn't. So they continued to go, and Chelsea's a little bit hesitant to continue going because they've been in there for all of 5 minutes and it's already
mhm,
starting. But she even mentioned, she's like, it looks like they would be animals in a cage.
mhm.
Like
Yeah,
she's already
like,
getting that vibe.
just from well, I don't know, like, with prisons, like, you have to have, like, a certain amount of gates that they have to go through, and they get checked kinda thing, and that sound to me, it either sounded like someone just, like, grabbed part of the cell door and, like, shook it, or they just, like, slammed it kinda thing.
Hmm.
It definitely sounded like a cell door, but yeah, Chelsea and her screaming, and then she, like, bolts, like, she that's, like, her first reaction, she's like, "Ah," and then, like, bolt.
There's this one way, we're gonna get into it in a second, but the way that she's like scurrying, it
Mhm,
like, oh my gosh, I mean, it did make me laugh. Maybe I do have 2 LOL moments, but,
mhm,
like, there's just this hesitancy about her to, like, wanna go any further, and because
mhm.
they heard this noise, she's like, "I don't wanna go to like, down this hallway," because that's where it was, and Dakota's like, "That's the North Hall, like, we have to go there." So it's like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't want to," but they ended up finding, like, Red Cell, who
Mhm,
again was the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, and there Alex is standing like outside of Red Cell, Tanner's standing right inside of it, and then Chelsea and Dakota are sitting on Red's bed. And
mhm,
when you're actually in that cell, I think that I don't know, I don't think that I have a picture of it actually. I think I was like so taken aback whenever I was in there because we also like did a tour,
mhm,
that I didn't take as many pictures because we went to West Virginia, and then the next month we ended up going to Ohio State Reformatory,
mhm.
and I took way more pictures there than I did at West Virginia, which is weird.
Hmm.
um I think I have like maybe 4 pictures, and it's all from like pretty much the outside. I don't
Oh.
know if it's because like we did like a night tour, but even
Oh.
just like sitting in there, you could see like Aryan Brotherhood and like all of this artwork, which is totally original from the inmates that were in those cells at that time. But
Mhm,
when you're sitting in Red Cell, there is kind of like graffiti and like you can see like the tally marks
Mm.
on there from, like, how many days that they had spent in there, and sometimes I'm just like, sitting in his like, where he would have slept
Mhm.
was, like, right where Dakota was sitting. I, like, made sure I put my butt, like, right in the place that he was because
Mhm.
not only, like, had Red sat there, I'm sure, and, like, contemplated his life, but, like,
Mhm.
Dakota was, and it's just, like, another person in the line of doing it, and that ended up being a really active sell for them.
Mhm. Yeah, like, they decide they wanna do, like, a digital recorder session, and we don't really get anything out of it because we do get interrupted by this, like, audible voice that they all can hear and we can all hear on the cameras, and I couldn't make out what it was. It almost sounded like someone just yelling, and this is, like, Dakota just gets, like, chilled up from this, and then they go silent, and they wait a little bit, and then they decide, "Okay, let's try and do an EVP session again," and then they get interrupted, and Chelsea hypothesized that the spirit just, like, doesn't wanna talk. Like, someone keeps interrupting this session for some reason, and then Dakota is, like, holding the digital recorder in front of him, and he can see it, like, starting to die, and he's like, "It's dying, like, it's dead." And, this confirms, like, Chelsea's theory, and then, like, immediately after that, you can kinda hear it faintly. It might have been off of Alex's audio, but you can hear, like, this laugh, and they all respond, like, at the same time. And Alex kinda, like, reacts to it immediately. His reaction freaks Chelsea out. This creates a domino effect at that point. Dakota is freaking out, and then all of a sudden, he says that he has something on his back, and then everyone starts panicking, and Dakota scrambles out of the jail cell, and, he couldn't even, like, do it fast enough. And Tanner immediately is just like, "Lift your shirt." Dakota is just like, "My back is burning," and it is, like, the weirdest sensation when you get scratched. Like, it's just, like, this weird burning sensation, and Tanner notices that Dakota has, like, slashes, like, it is, like, all across his back, like, and they're, like, big. Like, I've never seen something like that, and Tanner points out
No.
that this could be, like, something that was created from, like, the kicking Jenny. Um, I for some reason, I don't know why this came to my mind. I was just like, maybe these are, like, residual, like, slash marks from Red being stabbed so many times by his friend Rusty. Um, just from, like, I don't know, if you, like, look at his back, they're, like, kinda angled going down, and then, like, down is, like, lower back. They're, like, going in a different direction, but they almost look like they could be stab wounds. Like, I don't know what size of weapon Rusty used, but I have heard in different, like, I watch a lot of true crime. I have heard that, like, that's what it feels like to get stabbed. Like, it's like a burning sensation almost
Mm.
when it like, you never know, and I was just, like, trying to, like, the skeptic in me, and I was, like, rewatching it again, I'm like, "What is he leaning on?" Like, it wouldn't be bars that he's
Nothing.
leaning on, because if it was
Mhm.
bars, they would be up and down his back, and they are going, like, from his spine, they are, like, going out from his spine.
And
It's
there's nothing that
very
could do it, like, just even recounting, like, sitting in that position, it's bare. There's
Ooh.
nothing there. The only thing that, like, has any type of, like, rungs on it is the cell door, which is, like, they stay open for the most part anyway, unless you're physically shutting them. So there's
Mhm.
just, like, literally no way. I think Chelsea even counted and said there was, like, 6 of them. And so as soon as like and obviously like Dakota can't see what's on his back, but everybody else
Mhm.
can. They're in a panic and he's already panicking because of how he feels because that's a very uncomfortable feeling to get scratched in the first place. And he's
Mhm.
like, I need to get the hell out of here. And Tanner reminds them all to chill, which I feel like is mostly for Chelsea because she's like speed walking to find the exit and she's just like going like this. The whole time just like speed walking and it's to me, it was funny, and she's also like, "Get me the hell out of here."
Fair
Which
enough.
makes sense, and, when they get out, I feel like you can see, like, the totality of the experience because, like, Dakota's lower jaw is, like, shaking, like, you can tell that he's terrified. Alex says he's
Mhm.
gonna feel like he's gonna puke, and his face is red, like, Chelsea's terrified for the most part anyway,
Mhm.
and I think Tanner's just trying to, like, keep his wits about him for, like, as being that kind of role in the group, and
Yeah.
they gathered themselves, they go back in, and even just filming a recap of, like, what happened, there's just noises that keep happening, like a cell door
Mhm.
slamming, or maybe it was the elevator shaft or whatnot. And Dakota even says, like, I can't even get a word out here. Like, this place is
Mhm.
no joke. North Hall is living up to the stories so far. And they kind of think, like, okay, Dakota's asking all the questions. He's the leader. Like, maybe that's why they're picking on him because he's much more vocal. But then you had kind of like an insight that was like, well, wait a minute, if there is somebody that is positioning themselves to be more of like a leader, that
Mhm.
maybe this is like a show of authority, and so maybe that's threatening to the inmates and they're going to respond to that accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, like, that was my first thing because he was the one asking the questions. He's kinda in front of everybody while they're
Mhm.
walking around. He's kinda directing people. Even at the beginning, they sit down, he looks at his phone, "This is the blueprint. I know where this is." And from, like, an inmate's perspective, like, maybe they thought, "Okay, he knows what he's doing. He seems like the leader." And it was almost like maybe they thought, like, we call them the crew, but they could be a gang. So maybe he is a gang leader. And usually, when it comes to that kind of stuff, they want to take out the top person. They want to take out the gang leader. And who knows, like, there's probably gangs in there. Gangs can form within a prison. They can create cliques. So maybe they were just like, and especially like Red being a leader of an Aryan Brotherhood, like maybe he was just like, this is my cell. Who the F is this? Like,
Why are you in my space type thing?
why my space, and like attacked him kind of thing. Like, I don't know. You just never know.
Yeah, that was a really interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about before that, and I thought that that was, I don't know, I thought that that was really cool, and I think that they just like they just have enough of that spot, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's only like so much that you can take
Yeah.
at a spot like that, so they definitely want to keep moving. They end up going to the South Hall, which is more of like where the administrative stuff is. The haunted attraction that I was talking about earlier, that's like the hall that it takes place in. But they do find the electric chair, old Sparky.
Mhm.
And they kind of give it its space, right? Like, they give that
Yeah.
time and the space to just like look at it and like realize like a lot of executions happened here, and some of which were
Mhm.
on the electric chair.
Mhm.
And so, they return back to where they originally started. Chelsea's camera stops working, and she didn't even really like realize it at first. And during all of this commotion too, like, Tanner's filming, and then he responds to something, and he's like looking up, and there's this like visible spot on his shirt, on
Mhm.
his shoulder, and it's like a watermark, as if he got spit on, just like Sherry was telling them to begin with. And there's no watermarks anywhere else, no puddles, no
Mm-mm.
nothing, which is the same thing that happened to her. And so it's just like continues to keep happening and to keep happening. And I think that like they got in there around like 6 or 7 o'clock or something. And around like midnight or 1 o'clock, Dakota reaches and pulls up his shirt, and everyone's like, the scratches are still on your back. So it's like 6 hours later and they're still visible. And
Mm.
it's like they just keep returning to that in their conversations, no matter where they go. That's what they end up talking about. And that it's not only affected Dakota so much, but everybody else, because they witnessed it and saw it happening. And
Mhm.
so Tanner's like, I don't like this. I don't like that it's
Mhm.
still there, and it's like still reminding us of that time and how awful it was, and that panic. I think that that's the hardest thing to deal with, is like the panic type feeling, because
Mhm.
all logic is gone, and
Mhm.
you can't rationalize anything, and you feel like this is the end of the road.
Mhm. Yeah, like, and I think I made, like, a note of this, like, whoever's, like, watched or listened to previous episodes, like, I randomly have been getting scratched in my own home. Surprise, surprise, and I've tried to debunk that kinda stuff, and, like, I'll scratch myself, and, like, it'll go away within, like, minutes. But if I know I didn't do it, it will linger for hours. It's like the weirdest freaking thing. So I get it. It's just like you just don't know how to explain it. Like, how is this lingering for so long? It's
Well,
the
and you want it
wildest
to
thing.
go away because it's like a
Mhm,
symbol of, like, what's happened, and, like, when that's
mhm,
unexplained, it's really scary, so while it still sticks around, you, like, have that. I think that's why they, like, keep coming back to it, but, I
mhm,
mean, they realize that, like, that one event can't stop them from
mm-mm,
exploring the rest of the place, and because it is so massive, like they normally do, they split up into duos. Tanner and
mhm,
Alex go to the Sugar Shack, and Chelsea Dakota go to the Hole. um, Alex keeps getting, like, all of these chills even though they're, like, saying that it's, like, super hot, and they're in the Sugar
mhm,
Shack, and they're doing a digital recorder section session, and Alex is talking about, like, what happened down there, and an EVP they capture, they think says, like, "Please help me, like, please help me," and they do another digital recorder session to, like, kind of follow up, and Alex asks, like, "Can you explain what they did to you there?" And the EVP response that they get says and they're, like, both taken aback. They're like, "I've
mhm,
heard that. That's exactly what used to happen here. This is an
mhm,
intelligent haunting because it's answering this direct question." And Alex gives, like, the space, like, the intentional, um, like, honor, though, that it does, like, giving the space to say, like, "This was not okay. Like, we know what
mhm.
happened to you here, and that was not alright. And this is what it must have been like." And I think that when they do that and they open themselves up to what those experiences were, they get that type of activity.
Yeah, and it was wild when he was just like, "I'm chilled up," and they show his arm, and you can see the goosebumps, just like and then the hair is just standing up. It like that's wild. Like, in Fahrenheit, I don't even know what 112 is at this point, but it's probably really warm
I'm
feeling.
gonna Google it. Well, I
Convert
mean,
it
it
to
probably
Canadian.
wouldn't be that much, but even like 100 degrees, which is, I feel like maybe kind of standard, it's 37.7 degrees Celsius. So it's
Shit,
like,
that's hot. Like,
it's hot.
around here, like, fire start around that. Like,
Yeah.
it was 40 degrees one summer here, and, like, that was, like, weird. That's weird for this area. Um, but while they are in the Sugar Shack, we have Chelsea and Dakota. They go to RD Walls where he was murdered. They whip out the good old Ovulus and try to communicate with RD. And for those who are just tuning in and just watching and listening, the Ovulus is almost like a little digital library. It gives the spirits a way to communicate. It only has a certain amount of words that it can use, but sometimes it can say words or randomly it can say letters.
Yeah, which I did not
And
know until this episode.
no, which was super weird, and it ends up just giving them the letter D. And then Dakota kind of like takes that as a confirmation as maybe that's RD Walls who was murdered there. So he ends up asking like what did they use to kill you? And then it says metal. And Chelsea says that I can't be in here anymore. And they kind of figure like maybe that was what was used to murder him. But Dakota, typical sibling, tells her to relax and tells the spirits that they're not gonna run and they are not afraid. And they have their brother sister banter, which was actually like super funny. Like she was so mad at him, and even like before they even go and they like read the packet at this location, Chelsea's just like, this was my LOL moment because she's just like, oh my god, I like cried at the last prison we were in. And Dakota's like got this giant smile on his face and he goes, I know. He's just like, so he knew going into this, like
Well, and
the
he doesn't fare well in prisons, and, I mean, even
no.
to, like, this day, though, too, like, he
Mhm,
had said that was, like, the location that, like, really messed him up for a really long time after that
mhm,
experience, and he wants to go back and, like, redeem himself, and he did say in 2024 that his plan was to have them make a reappearance at West Virginia
Mhm.
State Penitentiary. So I hope that that happens because I think he needs to go back.
Mhm. Yeah, like, whenever that schedule clears up for them, they definitely there's a few places they need to go back to,
Yeah,
but, yeah, Chelsea says he gets caught up in the moment, and I don't know if this is because this is season 1 of Destination Fear, so this is him coming off of Ghost Adventures, so he might have, like, picked up a lot from Zach, like,
I'm sure.
from watching Ghost Adventures, like, Zach does tend to, like, taunt a little bit, and in the paranormal world, like, if you wanna get a reaction, like, that's how you get it. It's not the best way to do things, we all know this. But,
And,
yeah,
like,
he
his
was
taunts are mild.
his
You know what I
very
mean?
yeah.
It's not like I don't even know if, like, you would know it. Like, he might just say
Mhm,
something that's, like, factual, like, "Hey, you're not a good person," or
mhm,
"These things took place up here, and that was not okay," and you're like I think that he says it in I think it's Fairfield County Infirmary, like, which will, I get to, I think, in the next episode, but
mhm.
when it's like, "Oh, I mean, no disrespect to anybody here except for a certain person."
Yeah.
Because it's like it's like the most polite way to taunt
Yeah.
ever or to like antagonize. But I think Chelsea even gets pissed off that like you're not supposed to do that here. Like you didn't even like remember like in the boiler room, you're not supposed to do that. Like you just say stupid shit. And like they just kind of get into their like little like sibling kind of conflict,
It's
which
so
is
funny.
makes sense for their entire relationship. But
Mhm,
it doesn't help when they're alone together because then they freak out a
mhm,
little bit more. And
mhm,
even like Tanner ends up radioing them, and Dakota freaks out at this point in time because they had that conversation. And
mhm,
she just like, I feel like she kind of gets a little bit of revenge because she laughs at his
mhm.
expense a lot. But they
Oh,
do
yeah.
realize like, we need to get it together.
Yeah, like, and in, like, a previous episode, like, when they pair up together, they literally are like, "We're chickens.
Hmm.
We are chickens," and they, like, feed off of each other a lot, I find, because she is, like, on the ground with her camera just filming up at him, and she's like it's probably for, like, a good 30 seconds. She's just like, like, "This was great." Like, oh
Well, it's
my
like you have to
god.
take those moments too whenever like to offset all the other stuff that's going on to
Mhm,
just let yourself laugh and do it because you know what happens next, which is like they sleep
mhm,
alone. So it's like I have to make the time out of what I have with other people.
mhm,
And even before they go to sleep alone, like they check Dakota again and it's like, hey, your stuff's still there. And I think it just also heightens everybody else's fear
mhm,
because it's scary to split and sleep alone anyway, but at this location
mhm.
especially, I think that people are just on pins and needles. And
Yeah.
Dakota during the hat draw too, he's like, I do not want the North Hall. I can't go back to like the place where I got smacked in the back with like I think he says even later it's like with like a frying pan, something like go back there. And he doesn't.
Mhm,
He ends up going to the South Hall where Tanner was put
mhm.
on.
Yeah.
Chelsea ends up going down to the boiler room, of course. And like she feels like people are really underestimating her spot because everything else is where they've gotten like most of their activity. Tanner
Mhm,
gets the sugar shack where he's like, "Ugh, I've already spent time in there. I don't really know if I want to do that again." And then Alex gets the North Hall where Dakota got scratched and I think
mhm,
he's coming to the realization that he's kind of lucked out on all of the other locations thus far because at the beginning of the season it was like he'd stay in the gear room, he wasn't
mhm.
really like involved with those things, and now he has his own sleeping location. He's kind of been like getting more mild sleeping arrangements,
Yeah,
and this one he's like, wow, I think I got like the worst spot.
yeah, like, it was almost like, "Okay, now I'm in this, and now I gotta
Buck
man
up.
up." Yeah,
Hmm.
kinda thing, and they're all kinda scared, like, where they go, like, no location is a good location,
No.
especially at this place, and, Alex ends up kinda, like, setting up camp just, like, right outside of Red's jail cell. He kinda, like, makes note that his, like, feet are, like, in the cell. He tries to do a digital recorder session, outside the cell where Dakota was scratched. He wants answers for Dakota, like, "Why did you scratch him?" kinda thing, and again, like, no EVPs. I think, like, I don't know, almost like a half an hour goes by, and he tries to do it. again, and no EVPs. So whoever is around just really doesn't want to talk. And like same thing, like snitches get ditches. Like if you're in a jail, like no one's gonna talk. Like especially with people you don't know. And Alex says like prisoners don't talk, they act. They act out on what they want to do. And then what happens like 40 minutes south side of the prison at like 4:58 a.m. Tanner is in the sugar shack. He turns off night vision. This was kind of like one of my LOL moments because it was so like nonchalant and just like the way he said it, I just like freaking laughed.
So
And
Tanner, because he did it. That was like one of
yeah,
my other LOL moments in a different episode where he's
yeah,
just like factually telling what's going on, but it's like, of course I'm screwed type
yeah.
attitude.
Right? Like he turns off night vision to show like all of us watching, like the audience, how dark it is. And he's just like, "You see that? Of course you don't see it. It's pitch black in here." It's just like, yes, Tanner, we know. And we also know you are not impressed right now with where you are.
Right? It was like, I think they had spent so much time in there anyway. He was like, I got the sugar shack. Like, it was like,
Crap.
oh, darn. But
Yeah.
it was weird how things correlated for him because he asks if someone
Hmm.
is down there and then he starts to hear footsteps and he has the ovulus and then the ovulus says sneak. And it did seem like
Mhm.
somebody was sneaking around, right? Like he had just heard a couple footprints come in. And so
Yeah.
Tanner walkies Dakota asking him like, "Hey, are you walking around? Like, could I possibly be hearing you?" Dakota says no, and then Dakota starts hearing some of the noises too. And
Mhm.
they both start to kind of continue to hear this, and now Tanner's a little bit more scared than he usually is. And Dakota even agrees like, "Hey, like I'm freaked out too." So I don't know if they're essentially experiencing the same thing. Like I don't know if it's the same spirit in these like locations that's doing it, but they're both having similar experiences at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's weird. And then like Chelsea hears a loud boom or like a thump at her location, and then she walkies Alex to see if he heard it. The first one he didn't. And then he starts freaking out because then he hears it again, and then Chelsea kind of like looks at her camera and she's like, "My light's flashing." And it's like that red recording light and it's just like blinking as this happened before. And then her camera just dies. And Alex is bringing her a new battery and we're watching it off of Alex's camera and she just screams. What the actual heck? And then he starts running, except that she screams because she could hear him walking and he scared her. And Alex doesn't want to go back and he feels claustrophobic in the North Hall.
So as we were saying, like, you know, after Chelsea has like her scare,
Mhm.
it's so hard, I'm sure, for Alex to be like, I'm gonna walk back to North Hall
Yeah.
by myself, but he does, and
Mhm.
then, like, about 45 minutes after he left Chelsea, he gets kind of, like, awakened by this noise, and it sounds like another jail cell door is shutting, and
Mhm.
he asks the spirit, like, "Hey, if that was you, please do it one more time," and then he hears the loudest bang. Like, it was
Mhm.
way more than any of the other sounds that they heard the
Mhm.
entire night, and you can tell because he screams so loud, and
Mhm.
it's, like, kind of, like, in disbelief, and he's so frustrated, he's, like, on his, like, knees, his elbows are touching the ground while his head is in his hands, and he just lets out this most frustrated type, like, "Ugh," and
Mhm.
you can tell, like, he wants to get out, like, he's
Mhm.
patiently waiting second by second until they leave. And
Mhm.
around, like, 6:15 in the morning, they end up wrapping up, and they do leave, and by that about, like, 7 AM, Dakota's back, like, there's still some, like, minimal marks, but it's still there,
Wow. Yeah.
and they're all kind of, like, recapping their night after that as well, and Dakota even says like, I really didn't expect this. Like, I
Mm-mm.
didn't expect it to go as far as it did. I didn't expect to get what I got out of it. Like, originally it was a test for everybody else, but he realizes that like at this location he was the one that was tested, and the physical attack really has him worried, and he's thinking like, I might not even be able to go on. Like, if something else happens like this or worse, I'm tapping out.
Mhm. Yeah, like, and that's a lot to have those huge scratches, and like, remember, like, he hasn't seen them at
Right.
all. Like, nobody has, like, played back the footage for him even, like, in real time, be like, "Hey, this is what it looks like." Nobody took a picture on their phone that we know of, and, like, to just physically feel it and then have all these people telling you, like, "You got scratched, blah, blah, blah," and freaking out, like, that would literally mess with your head, and, like, I would totally get shaken up by that as well.
And they know that. I feel like they know. It's kind of like whenever you sign up for anything, right?
Mhm,
Like, I acknowledge the risks that I'm taking by doing X, Y, and Z, but
mhm,
normally those things don't happen. You
mhm,
know, like maybe one out of 100 chances that like those things do happen. And so it's like they know the risks going into this,
mhm,
and they haven't really had that many ramifications or negative
mhm,
consequences thus far on this road trip. So I
mhm,
think Chelsea and her final thoughts about like the episode at Moundsville is really like, this puts it into perspective. Like, I got to see that firsthand. I didn't get that experience,
mhm,
but someone else that I loved did, and it was just as hard to go through and witness it as it probably was for Dakota for it to like happen to. And Tanner does
mhm,
the same thing. He's like, I can't even like wrap my mind around this. Like, I've never been a part of something like that. And he starts even doubting like, can we all do this? Like, it's I think
mhm,
that like this episode was the turning point that says like, we have limitations. Like,
mhm,
we're doing this and we're pushing it to the max, and that's great, and we're going above and beyond, and now someone physically got affected. And I think that like, because you can see the marks and you
mhm,
have some visual evidence to back up that emotional experience too. It's like,
mhm,
it's just like Alex says, like, no one's feeling safe. Like,
mm-mm,
he knew this would change Dakota forever.
mhm.
And he's like, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah, and for next week, they if you want to watch along, off we go on our adventures again. Thirsty Thursdays. If you want to watch along with us, you can stream this season of Destination Fear on HBO Max and Discovery Plus. The next episode, though, the craziness continues, people, in a more condensed location. Fairfield County Infirmary. If the crew is looking for a break, this place is not gonna give them one
Not
whatsoever.
even freaking close. And
No.
so I hope that you've loved our renditions of our
Mhm.
own experiences during this entire episode. And you can catch us here every Thirsty Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m.
Mm,
Eastern Time. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as Becky usually says, we're going to be here next Thursday doing the same darn thing. So if you find yourself
mhm,
continuing to come back to this channel, hit the subscribe button so you can get notified all of the time when we drop a new episode. So we look forward to seeing you next week with drink in hand. So
mhm.
have a great weekend, everyone, and
Yes.
cheers.
Cheers.